Yeah. Um, you know, that the recognition that the kingdom of God is coming changes the way we live today. Um, and actually, the effect is not like, oh, we don't care about now what's happening today because we're waiting for the kingdom. No, that's not the effect that it has. And the effect is we need to act as though Jesus is Lord of our lives today. As though God's kingdom was real and true today. That's the way we live. And so it does make a difference in the way that we live. We've been in the first 3 Sundays of this year. We did this short series on prayer. And I encourage you to continue praying for your pray pal, a person that you met in the service that maybe presented to you what the need was to continue praying for that person. And that was the subject of the first sermon, is the prayer of power for our lives and how to realize that. The point of all of this is not to pray specifically for that thing that we're praying about, but rather to teach us and to give us examples of how to pray for those things. So a prayer of power for our lives. Secondly, a prayer of vision for our city. And that was last week. And finally today, a prayer of determination for our families. And one that's very close to my heart. And I'm hoping that this example of a prayer that I'm taking from Scripture will be useful to you, and that you will begin to pray a prayer of determination for your families. Now, what I promise not to do this morning is give you counsel on how to bring up your children, and or how to communicate with your aging parents, or how to find common ground with siblings, which sometimes can be difficult. I used to be really good at giving family advice until I got children myself, and then I kind of went silent on that issue, at least for a while. And I'm not sure why that is. I had to do a fair bit of thinking about that, why it is that happens. You know, when you get your own children, you just kind of... and I think that it has a lot to do with the contribution of our own mistakes into the relationships of our lives. And yeah, we do make mistakes, but you know, when one of our children has a problem, we like to focus on that problem without looking at the other factors that contributed to that problem. So the expression, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, is not really the whole picture, because all the wheels squeak. They all squeak, and they all need grease. So then, from one squeaky wheel that needs grease to another this morning, I would like to introduce the subject of praying for our families by looking at the example of the life of Jacob. And not that I haven't spoken about Jacob before, but we're going to draw something else from that this morning. We sang, joining the heroes of the faith. Well, according to Hebrews, Jacob is one of the heroes of the faith, and there are reasons for that, which we're going to look at this morning. But let's start with Hebrews chapter 11, and the reason why he's called a hero of the faith. He's in the list, he's in the list that Hebrews gives as explaining what faith is. And this is what it says, just specifically about Jacob in Hebrews 11, verse 21. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. Now, this is in a moment that Jacob that I'd like to speak about this morning is a moment that Jacob was struggling. It was really a climax in his life, and not when he was dying, because I suppose that would be a low point, but but before that. And there's a lot in this passage. He was leaning on top of his staff, and we'll talk about that later. But also, you notice that it says that he blessed each of Joseph's sons. Joseph was his son. Why is he blessing his grandsons? And actually, if you look at Genesis 49, you'll see that it's not only Joseph's sons, but all his sons that he's blessing there as he's standing in front of them, leaning on his cane. And the language in Genesis 49 that we find that these blessings or these prophecies about his sons is written is a little bit difficult sometimes to understand. And it would probably be better if we understood the details of all of Jacob's sons in order for us to understand what he was saying about them. We don't have time to do that. We won't do that. But maybe we'll look at one, and that is Joseph. We know a lot about Joseph. Joseph is probably one of the most well-known stories in the book of Genesis. And so what Jacob has to say about Joseph is very revealing. Let's read chapter 49, verses 22 to 24. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. You see what I mean, right? With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility, but his bow remained steady. His strong arms stayed limber because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel. What the dickens is going on there? There's like archers and there's hostility and, but he, stayed limber, in other words, he's like an archer, but he's holding. Okay, so you would have to know something about archery, right? But you don't pull back the bow just to stay there, right? Because otherwise you start. Anyway, so a lot of imagery there, a lot of poetry. But Joseph was loved by his father more than any of the other sons. We see that in Hebrews even, right? You'd think that they would kind of fix that, but no, they even in Hebrews, it says that he blessed Joseph's sons, and it seems that all throughout his life that Jacob loved Joseph more than the rest. And it's called parental favoritism, and it's not nice. It can be painful, actually. And I think that parental favoritism, more than anything else, is what caused Joseph's brothers to hate him. Let's look at 37, Genesis 37. Here comes that dreamer, the brothers say. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Can you imagine saying that to your brother? About your brother? We're going to kill him. Let's make a plan to kill this guy. Of course, the story continues. If you know the story of Joseph, they don't kill him. They end up selling him into slavery. And maybe it's not as bad as killing. I'm not sure. I haven't decided on that yet. Remember that his brothers, in the selling of him, they made a profit. They made money on their brother's demise. And then they fabricated this painful lie that a wild animal had mauled him to death. And they foisted then that lie on their father. The story turns out okay, I guess we could say, because Joseph ends up saving his whole family from starvation. But I still have questions in the back of my mind as to what exactly. So here's Jacob standing there, leaning against his cane, blessing, has a prophecy for each one of his sons. I'm wondering if that in that moment he understood he knew what had occurred between his brothers, between all of his sons. If he understood that actually that his sons wanted to kill Joseph, that they sold him to Egypt, and that's how he ended up in Egypt. I wonder if he understood that. How did he put two and two together near the end of his life? Let's read again what it says. With bitterness, they attacked him, the archers, remember? With bitterness, they attacked him. They shot at him with hostility. How could he have known? I mean, it's not written in Scripture that Jacob knew this story. Is it possible that it takes one to know one? Is it possible that Jacob was recognizing the same scars in his son that he had in his own life? Is it interesting how family dysfunctions repeat themselves from generation to generation, unfortunately? It often happens. Many years earlier, now I'm talking about when Jacob was young, okay? Many years earlier, also another situation of parental favoritism. Jacob cheats his brother Esau out of his inheritance and out of the blessing of his father, which basically meant that he was going to be the next patriarch or leader of the family. The anger of his brother Esau against him for doing this sounds really similar to what happened to Joseph. Look what it says. Genesis 27 now. Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." Look at the words. Again, imagine, this is family. I'm going to kill him. That deep, that angry, to want to get back at him by ending his life. Jacob, of course, found out about this, and he ran away. Who wouldn't? He's going to save his life. So he ran away, and he in the place that he ran to, he finds another place to live. He lives with his uncle, works for his uncle. He marries, and overall, God blesses him. But in his heart, he remained in a place of alienation from his brother for 20 years. Alienation. I promise not to throw big words without explaining them, okay? So alienation means separation. A state of being withdrawn or separated from a person to whom one has formerly been attached. That's to alienate. We were created, God created us to live attached to each other. God created us to live in family relationships. God created us to live as a church together. And so many people live in alienation, detached from each other. It's not healthy, it's not normal. So what happens? What does alienation do to a person's heart? Well, it does a lot of things, and that's not the subject of this sermon, but Ephesians chapter 4, verse 18. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Okay, we could dig that up a little bit, but it's pretty clear it's not good. Not a lot of good words there. Hardening, ignorance, darkened. Yeah, so for 20 years, Jacob lived this way for 20 years. It poisoned his relationships. It poisoned his work. It poisoned his outlook on life. And when things got intolerable with his uncle, because he had gone to work for his uncle, they got intolerable. He ran away, still running. Jacob running. He still takes his wives, and I really don't want to jump over that without underlining that I don't think it's right. But the Bible just lays it out as it is. He had 2 wives. That's a problem. So he ran away with his wives, his children, all his belongings. It's at this point that Jacob makes the decision to reconcile with his brother. There's another big word. Reconciliation. Can you repeat that? Reconciliation. Yeah, if you've been a Christian for a while, maybe you know the word. Sometimes we know the words and we forget the meaning of it, just because they're big words. But reconciliation is the solution. It's the healing of alienation. Hey, we're learning theology here. It's the solution, the healing of alienation. But it costs a lot. It's difficult to find reconciliation. There's something to pay for that. It doesn't come cheap. And actually, nothing worthwhile comes without a cost. So let's read. All of that was my introduction, background, context, whatever you want to call it. Now let's read the beginning of the prayer in Genesis 32. Then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan. There's that staff, that cane again. But now I have become 2 camps. Big. I have lots of stuff now. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid. I'm afraid of my brother. I'm afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, you ever done that? Throw God's promises back into his face, you know? You have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. But you have said, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. But you have said, you will keep in perfect peace him whose mind is steadfast, because he trusts in you. But you have said, oh, you've heard this one before, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. You have said, he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. You have said that. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. You have said. You have said that. And so in Jacob's heart, his prayer is seeking for reconciliation, but he's scared. He's scared to face the mistakes, the consequences of his past. We all have those, don't we? The mistakes, the consequences of his past. So he has a plan. Jacob has a plan. It seems like Jacob always has a plan, whether it's his mother's plan or his own. He's got plans. And so this time he starts sending gifts. Not little gifts, big gifts. He sends gifts along the road ahead of him. He sends servants and animals and all kinds of things, thinking that if Esau comes with his 400 men and kills the servant and scatters the animals, then at least he has enough time to escape. He's going to make a run for it. Because that's what Jacob is good at. Making a run for it again. And so he's planning things in such a way, if you read the story in detail, you'll see that he's setting things up so that if things go wrong, he has a way out. But the night before he meets his brother, Jacob meets God. And it's pretty unusual meeting, because it wasn't a dream or a vision which a lot of the patriarchs had, including Jacob himself. No, it wasn't one of those. It was a wrestling match. That's what it was. A wrestling match. And so let's read it in Genesis 32. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me. I will not let you go unless you bless me." And the man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Quite a passage. Could say a lot of things about that. And actually, there was someone that came to me in the first service, and he showed me his cauliflower ears and said that, "Yeah, I'm a wrestler." You never know who's going to be in the crowd, right? But he really liked the illustrations that I was pulling out of that. And I know this is recorded, so I have to go gently about stories about my children. But when my oldest was about 10 years old, I remember this incident because sometimes we would get into these impasses, all right, with my older son. And I was angry at something, he was angry at something, and there was just it seemed there was no way that we could get beyond this. We couldn't get beyond, do you know what I'm saying? Just logic just wouldn't do it. Okay, we're just getting nowhere with this. And in the middle of one of these moments, I remember looking at him and giving him a push. And at first he's like shocked, surprised, like, what is this? Because I don't normally act that way. And he noticed a little smile on me and realized, oh, okay, so he comes back and he pushes me. And so I turn around and push him with both hands, and okay, so Alex, if you've met Alex, even at 10 years old, he was a big boy, okay? But at any rate, so we're going out at it on the floor, and after a while, I figured, we're going to have to stop. Okay, it's enough. We need to stop now. And he's not stopping. But by that time, we're just laughing, and you know what? It was over. It was done. You get what I'm saying? It was just the thing that we were arguing about, the thing that we couldn't get past was over. I don't know why God chose to wrestle with Jacob, but God knew it's what he needed in that moment. The wrestling drew Jacob out of himself and his fears and forced him to focus on God rather than all of that stuff. Focus on God. And so Jacob's prayer, his struggle with God that night, I believe was for his family. Was for his family. Have you ever wrestled with God for your family? Have you ever wrestled with God for your family? When God was done with Jacob, he couldn't run anymore. You ever think about that? He couldn't run away anymore. He did something to his hip there, and he couldn't run. It's like almost he had to trust God now. He had no choice but to trust God. In fact, he was still leaning on that cane of his as he stood and blessed his sons at the end of his life. If he was able to pass on a blessing at all to his son, it was because he was leaning on his cane Are you following me? Because he had struggled with God, he was able to say something about his sons. Wrestling with God made him weak in his legs, but strong in character and in spirit. In my weakness, then I am strong. It's only in my weakness that I become strong. So what do you need from God in your family? What do you need from God in your family? You may not need soft words of comfort. You may not need what I have to say to you. You may not need to be left alone with your thoughts either. You may not need sleep. I don't know how old your children are. You may not need another movie night. You may not need a healthy hip. What you do need is a blessing from God in your family. A blessing from God. I will not let you go until you bless me. Situations push us. I've invested so much with these kids. Why, God, does my investment seem worthless? And God pushes back and he gives a single leg takedown, if you know wrestling terminology. No, it's not worthless what you're doing. Train up a child. Continue to train him. And when he's older, he will not depart from it. Yeah, but he hurt me so badly when I was a child. Why, God, did you allow that person to do that to me? Why did you allow it to happen to me? Now it's the diving elbow drop. God comes with, I didn't cause it. I didn't cause it, but I can make something beautiful out of it. Watch as I finish the good work that I started in you. Another says, we used to be so close. Us family members, we used to be so close and we drifted apart so many years now. Why, God, do I feel alone? Why do I feel alone? God comes with the head scissors. You are not alone. You are not alone. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for I am with you, and I will go ahead of you. Well, I've said things and I've done things that I'm not proud of. And I want to make things right, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid that my son or my daughter or my mother will never want to have a relationship with me because of what I have done. Now it's the waist lock. The waist lock where God says, my forgiveness is real. It brings healing and reconciliation. I will keep you in perfect peace. In all your ways, submit to me, and I will make your paths straight. How many would say today about our families that we are ready to wrestle with God for our families? Lord, I will not let you go until you do something in my life. Lord, I will not let you go until you begin to do a work in my family. How many are ready to wrestle with God for our families? I thought I would finish with Hebrews since I started with Hebrews. And I don't know if you want to get someone to sing for you or... Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways, and I suppose wrestling would be various ways. Right? Many different ways. That's one way that God spoke to the heroes of the faith, in this case, Jacob. God spoke to our ancestors in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. I just thought that was interesting, the way that God chooses to identify himself. You notice that in one verse there, you have these two words, speak and son. I'm not sure if those two words often go together. If there's communication problems, there's usually between father and son. Right? But many of us experience issues in our relationships, in our family. This is the way that God chooses to identify himself. He speaks to us through the Son. Relationships are important to God. He created us that way. He can give us freedom, victory, healing from alienation. God can give that to us. But are we ready to struggle with him, to wrestle with God for the health of our families? Are we? You're very quiet this morning.